Thanks, Mr. Speaker. The Premier was in BC to sell Kinder Morgan pipeline to her teammates in the BC NDP. That went poorly. Premier told CBC News that the carbon tax is a tremendous opportunity for Albertans to make better choices. Albertan families all they have to do to see their household finances crippled by this carbon tax get better is to make better choices. Who knew? To the Premier, if your advice to Albertans worried about the impacts of your government's carbon tax is simply to make better choices, is it fair to say up till now you think Alberta families have been making poor choices?
Honourable Well, you know, Mr. Speaker, I have to say it's very encouraging to see that the members opposite are sharing question writers today. That's an interesting choice. But that being said, we are very proud of our climate leadership plan. We know that pricing carbon is what experts and economists and business leaders around the world say is what is needed to reduce emissions and to build the economy at the same time. So that's exactly what we're doing. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we are supporting low and middle income families by ensuring that 60% of Alberta families get rebates starting in January, and we will not apologize.
Thank you, Honourable Premier. First supplemental.
Premier should apologize for her arrogance. It's condescending to respond to the very real anxieties and fears of Albertans by telling them to make better choices.
Agreed.
For champagne socialists across the aisle, making better choices might be as easy as buying a new car, as the Premier suggested last April. But families struggling can't afford that.
That's right.
To the Premier, your carbon tax rebates will not cover the full cost of a household: electricity, natural gas, gasoline, food, groceries. When Albertans are told to make better choices, are you referring is the choice between filling up the gas tank and buying groceries? That's what it seems to be.
Honourable Member, Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that the members opposite have finally learned that there are lower and middle income families that actually need their support. It's nice to hear them finally talking about them, but Mr. Speaker, that's why our government very intentionally determined that there would be a rebate provided to low and middle income families so that this would not have a disproportionate effect on them. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, the less income families have, the less greenhouse gas emissions and the less carbon pricing that they would be subjected to. And in fact, they will come out ahead, Mr. Speaker, because we are standing up for middle-class families.
Second supplemental.
Mr. Speaker, low and middle income Alberta families have to make better choices every day by managing their expenses, something that this government has failed to do. Telling them to make better choices is as arrogant and condescending as anything I've heard for years in this legislature or Alberta. So I thought I would give this Premier an opportunity to make better choices too. Premier, will you direct your finance minister to make better choices and give Albertans a plan to someday pay back the debt that Alberta families are saddled with?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. What we are going to do is we are going to make the kind of choices that have the backs of Albertans. We are not going to move ahead with the kinds of flat tax that these folks wanted to go ahead with in terms of healthcare premiums. We are not going to go ahead with laying off nurses. We are not going to go ahead with laying off teachers. We are going to support low-income families. We're going to bring in progressive taxation. We're going to support working families with better child care. We're going to do all those things, Mr. Speaker, because we support working families.